Now, this is something that a lot of our listeners will be able to identify with. Rosie got COVID in August 2 years ago, but is still feeling the effects of the virus. Rosie has what's known as long COVID, and her family say the illness has changed all of their lives. I'm delighted to say that Rosie and her dad, Colin, are on the line now. Guys, you're really welcome to the programme. Thanks for taking the time to speak to us. I suppose, Rosie, if I can start with you, do you want to talk to us a little bit about your life before you got COVID? You know, to tell us what your passions and interests were, just to give us a sense of where you were at before this virus changed things for you.
So the summer before COVID, I went to Disneyland with my dance school. I'm an Irish dancer, and we performed there, and I think it was one of the best holidays we've ever been on. And I was a championship level Irish dancer. Um, Now obviously I can't do that, but it was one of my main hobbies.
Yeah.
I was very interested in art and was had chosen to do art for A level,
Mm-hmm.
and um I went to GB and all sorts of clubs, but dancing was one of my main hobbies.
But just a typical teenager, loved to dance, loved to travel. And then in August 2 years ago, you got COVID. And what was the initial experience of COVID like, Rosie?
That week that I was in, or a bit over a week that I was in isolation,
Mm-hmm.
um, I didn't really struggle at all. I essentially had no symptoms apart from being tired, loss of taste, and a bit of a headache. But it was after that week of isolation that I was trying to get back to school, and then I started having dizziness in the mornings and fainting, and the headache just didn't really go away.
So at that point, I mean, how much was long COVID on your horizon? Did you know about long COVID? Was it something that people were talking about at that time? It's almost hard to even put ourselves in that position 2 years ago now to remember, what was the dialogue like about that at the time? Did it cross your mind it was long COVID?
Not really, no, I hadn't really heard of it
Yeah.
before then, and we had a lot of doctor's appointments, and even that doing blood tests and trying to rule out anything. And then somebody had mentioned long COVID,
Mm-hmm.
and then it was more looking into what that was and what that kind of meant. But before that, I hadn't really heard of it at all.
Colin, during that time, what was
Hello,
that?
Claire.
Hello, thanks so much for speaking to us, Colin. I mean, as a parent going through that and your daughter not knowing what these symptoms are, and even as we heard there from Rosie, doctors not even being able to tell you what it was. I mean, how was that period of time?
It was enormously stressful.
Yeah.
There's no question of that. I mean, I sat with her um, on the sofa when she was feeling awful, and she was just sobbing. When am I going to get better? When am I going to be able to go to school? When am I going to be able to get back into my life?
Mm-hmm.
And of course, we had no answers. Um, Totally powerless in actually doing anything to help as well. Rosie mentioned the headache, uh, but Rosie's really had a migraine for about 2 years. And anyone who suffers from a migraine will know how debilitating it can be. Now, it's not full on all the time,
Yeah.
but what happens is when Rosie puts particular uses particular energy, whether physically or cognitively using her brain, um, the headache just gets worse and worse and worse until it reaches a point where really she just cannot stand it and it feels like she's going to be sick. So, um, not being able to offer anything in terms of pain relief is awful as a father.
Mm-hmm.
Being left with a teenage child who you can't help and who is utterly miserable. So yeah, it was a tough time, but we have come through that with the support of, well, various people, good doctors, but also the charity that I now volunteer for, called Long COVID Kids, which provides all sorts of support to teenagers who are in this sort of position. Like online get-togethers. There's a choir on this afternoon. They do a Long COVID Kids choir via Zoom,
Yeah.
which is all fabulous, and gives people something to hold on to, some sort of socialization, because I guess one of Rosie's big problems is lack of contact with her friends, and they're so important when you're 16, 17, 18.
I can imagine. And Rosie, listening to your dad talk about that, I mean, that you're the one as well, going through this, and so much about being a teenager is being sociable, and it's in a way really encouraging to hear that you have, at least, that support that we're hearing about through the charity there. But would you say, the kind of mental side of this has been just as hard as the physical side?
Yeah, definitely has been tough. I think it was 3, 4 months at the start, before I even saw any of my friends in person. Um, so yeah, definitely tough and kind of lonely,
Yeah.
because it's hard, even when you do see your friends, they don't fully understand exactly what you're going through. So the Long COVID Kids has been really good, to help find people who do get it and get exactly how it feels.
Yeah. I mean, for now, your symptoms now, we've talked about the migraine. What other impact is long COVID having on you?
I still haven't got my taste back. Um, I've got no taste apart from strawberries and salt and vinegar, which is a bit of a strange combination.
Yeah.
But those are the couple things I can taste. Muscle pains, fatigue, brain fog,
And if you
muscle weakness as well.
And if you find, because when people, going through COVID, we had certain vulnerable groups, didn't we, that we were made aware would be more susceptible to COVID. And I suppose as a younger person now with long COVID, I imagine you're still challenging some of those perceptions of what it's like to be a person with long COVID, given that you are so young.
Yeah. A lot of people don't seem to understand that it's a long-term thing,
Yeah.
and that just because you're young and fit and healthy doesn't mean that you can't be affected by it.
Mm-hmm.
I think if I can just add to what Rosie said there, is people don't think about it. People don't know that COVID is still circulating, and they don't know that they're still massively at risk. Every time you get infected, you have a 1 in 10 chance of developing long-term symptoms. Now, it might be loss of taste, which a lot of people think, well, that's all right, loss of taste, it will come back. Maybe it's not such a bad thing. But particularly for children, if you can't taste chocolate or sweets or anything, it takes a lot of the fun out of life.
No, it is it's a simple pleasure, isn't it? That's what being a kid's all about.
But and what people don't, I think, understand is that it's 1 in 10 infections, and if you've been infected more than once, every time you're rolling the dice, and so the risk is cumulative and it builds, and each time the chance that the virus will do what it's done to Rosie and leave behind sort of wreckage of what was there before actually increases, and the damage that's done to all sorts of parts of the body. There's a big increase in type 1 diabetes, which seems to be associated with COVID infection. There was all the strep throat stuff last autumn, which is probably due to the dysregulation of the immune system that COVID
Yeah, and
causes.
it is. So many theories about, even infection and simple viruses. Usually, how things have changed even post-pandemic, just for even different environmental reasons, aren't there, Colin? But as a family, how has this experience impacted you as a unit, as a family that one day, we're sending Rosie off to Disneyland to perform in Irish dance, and now 2 years on, you're campaigning about this, you're working, you're volunteering with a charity. But as a family, what direction has it taken you in?
Well, in some ways, it's been I mean, it's been horrendous in some ways. There's no question of that. But on the other hand, there's always hope, and there's always a silver lining to everything. I mean,
Yeah.
I mentioned obviously the charity. Rosie has been incredible, not just in terms of representing the charity and speaking up on behalf of young people. She pulled together a wonderful art exhibition,
Hmm.
which really helped raise awareness. She can probably tell you about that much better than I can. But she's also been working with clinicians and researchers on Tuesday coming. She is presenting at a conference on the experience of long COVID and the family, which will be, we'll be speaking to the people who are going to be commissioning services for children and young people with long COVID.
Really, really
And so they
important
really
work.
need to hear. So
Yeah.
it's great work. And so I'm so proud of her for doing that, even when she's feeling utterly miserable. But in terms of the downsides, we're just back from Donegal. We go to Donegal every summer. And last year we tried to walk along the beach. There's a beach at a place called Malig, which we call Daisy's Beach because many years ago we sprinkled our stillborn daughter's ashes there, my wife and I. So it's a very special place to us. And every year we
Yeah.
go and we walk along the beach, we watch the sunset, and we take the kids with us and we have a nice time there. Last year I had to drag Rosie in a wheelchair across the sand, and it got to a point where we reached this set of rocks, and
Hmm.
I just physically couldn't pull her any further.
Hmm.
Um, and so the rest of the family walked up the rest of the beach and we sat and we watched the waves come in and wash away the tire marks from the wheelchair.
Hmm.
Now this year, although Rosie's not in any way completely better, she did at least manage to walk the whole way along the beach on her own. Well, in fact, her boyfriend Curtis carried her the last bit, which was really good of him.
Yeah.
But because she was her legs were starting to hurt. But that's the reality. I have to watch my 18-year-old, formerly very fit daughter
Yeah.
having to be carried sometimes, and that's not easy. And it impacts across the whole family unit, of course, because we're not able to do always what we would have done before, or we have to plan very carefully about what we're going to do in advance. How long are we going to be traveling for? How
Hmm.
much recovery time do we need to build in for Rosie to
Yeah.
get over the journey?
It's a
Sometimes that might be 2 or 3 days.
Yeah, it's about thinking about how you're going to do it, but do it differently now, isn't it? Because
Absolutely,
as a
yeah.
family, you're still going to have things you want to do. Rosie, certainly, I'm sure you want to do them as well, and you're just trying to navigate it in a way that helps everybody. I mean, Rosie, I just want to ask you, if there was something you could tell our listeners today that you would like everybody to know about what it's like to be a young person with long COVID. I mean, what is that? What do you feel that you're having to explain again and again? What do you wish people knew without you having to tell them?
That we're not just going to get better really quickly, but we are still here, which was one of the main messages of my art exhibition that I did, that we're still here and we're still fighting to be heard, and that it's not just going to go away, and there's a chance for anyone to end up like this. But we're still pushing to be heard and get treatment, and just we're still here, and we're not going to go away and stop fighting for potentially getting better.
Yeah. I mean, Rosie, you have resilience, and you can hear that, and Colin, you can hear how proud you are of your daughter as well. And I suppose that's something that the two of you and the rest of the family can appreciate, that you as a family are showing, that by sticking together and getting through some really hard times, that you grow as a family in that way, differently, as we said, Colin, than you would have expected 2 years ago. But it's been lovely to speak to you both. Thanks so much for taking the time this afternoon. Keep us posted on your progress and what you're getting involved in, Rosie, because it is incredibly impressive. Good luck with the conference this week. Not every teenage girl would be up on stage and being able to explain so articulately your experience in the way that you have. So thank you, Rosie and Colin. Rosie, of course, got COVID 2 years ago, next month. Still feeling the effects of her virus now with long COVID, and her dad Colin there speaking to us. We do appreciate that. And if you have experienced long COVID within your family, do get in touch with us. It's 81771. We heard from Rosie there saying, you know, you're not on your own, and she wants people to know that it is out there. We'd love to hear from you as well. So it's Rosie and Colin Pidgeon. Thank you to